Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
GetFree.ai. You heard me talk about it. I'm going to keep on talking about it because I love it. I've had about a year and a half, 18 months practice with it, and I still enjoy it. And it saves me time and it saves me energy. Free.ai takes your note, makes what you're talking with a client, just press record. And it does either transcript, it does a subjective and an objective with a letter if needed for your client and for whoever might need it. So for $99 a month, it saves me so much time that it's worthwhile. And if you do it for a whole year, guess what? You get 10% off. More importantly, this is what you got to remember because you are my audience that listens to Resilience Development in Action. If you do listen to this and you want to use free.ai, put in the code STEVE50 in the promo code area, STEVE50, and you will get $50 off in addition to everything we just talked about. Get freed from writing your notes. Get freed from even writing your transcripts. Use that to your advantage. Free.ai, a great service. Go to getfree.ai and you will get one of the best services that will save you time and money. And I highly encourage you to do so. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 238, which is the premiere episode of 2026. If you haven't listened to the most downloaded episode of 2025, go back and listen to that episode. But I'm excited today because we're hopefully going to meet sometime in the near future. But I've known our guests for about a year now, over a year. And we've bothered each other by text, by voice. We've talked. She's been on the episode before with the other people from the Beyond the Badge and Beyond, Behind the Badge and Beyond. Sorry, guys. But really, just truly a great human being. I got to know her personally, and that's the stuff that I really enjoy because she told me that a lot of stuff about we agree so much on therapy. We agree on so many other things. And I know she works with first responders too, which is even better, but truly just a genuine, nice human being. But I'll stop giving her flowers because her head won't fit onto the screen and we need to see the therapy gorilla in the back. But Alexa, welcome. Alexa Silva, welcome to Resilience Development in Action.
Hi, Steve. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm excited to be here. And it's kind of weird because last time we did this, we were in a group. So here we are, and my anxiety of public speaking will be fun today. So
there's no one listening. That's what you got to remember. It's just me and you. There's no one listening right now. Only like, a million people later on. I'm kidding. I don't have that much of following just yet.
Well, we'll just pretend that you're a figment of my imagination then.
Great. That's a great place to start. Are you safe?
Yes. I have no idea where I am this morning, but I'm here.
Well, that's how I feel about it this morning too. My coffee hasn't kicked in yet, but no, I was really excited, truly, everything I just said and more, because we've really done a fantastic work with Behind the Badge and Beyond. But more importantly, I want people to get to know you personally. I've had Aaron Sheridan, who is also part of Behind the Badge and Beyond. I've had Amanda Rizzoli on, again, someone from our group. Now I want you on. I'm hoping to have other members like Richard and Jen and Lisa, particularly. I've had Bill on several times. Bill's a good colleague of mine and a business partner. But people may not know who you are. So I've been introducing everyone else but you. So how about you tell a little bit about yourself to our audience?
Yeah, so my name is Alexa Silva. I am a licensed independent clinical social worker in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And I recently, probably like at the end of August, beginning of September, just opened up my own private practice, which has been, yes, it has been, what are the words? I don't even have words this morning for it. Scary yet empowering, exciting. I have definitely had a lot of great help from some friends that I will not mention, cough, cough, people from the behind the badge, especially, people that have been on this podcast. And it's crazy how you have this idea in your head to go into private practice, but then once you actually do it, you still feel like, oh my gosh, is this real, right? And there's so much more to it. But the reason that I wanted to start the private practice is really having that sole focus of first responders, military, and veterans in clinical practice. And I ended up not only going into this route clinically for social work, but I am also married to a Marine veteran and a fire lieutenant. So that I have the big personal side of it. I always feel like when I'm not working, I become the client at home because we have two young kids as well. So I know we'll talk about that later, but also doing couples counseling with first responders. That's an interesting lens. But I actually, sorry, let me back up. I got my bachelor's in psychology at UMass Lowell, and I have a minor in disability studies with that. Then I did my master's in social community psychology. And I'm not sure if that still exists, the Masters of Social Community Psychology, that program. My plan was to go do a PhD. I originally wanted to do clinical psychology, but that would have been another 7 years. So then I got stuck and I can't do this. That's, would have been another whole program. So I decided to do my Master's of Social Work at Salem State. And that's where it really kind of came together. But with the background, I have worked at the VA, I've worked inpatient, I've worked in residential schools, community, doing children and elder, working on the abuse side, critical incident, trained in CISM as well. But just kind of all over the diverse platforms. But it kept bringing me back to working with first responders and military and veteran, and coming from a first responder family too, had a big effect on that. But ultimately, the goal was private practice, and here we are. So,
Well, I find it funny because in our group, most of you are like married or from families of first responders. And sometimes I feel like an anomaly because I don't have any of that attachment per se, but it's just funny.
I mean, I don't think you always need to have the attachment. What you do, I mean, with this podcast, and I mean, you you probably have encounters throughout, throughout being a clinician and stuff, but you've also been doing this for a long time, and you have such good rapport, and you also, I think it's just building that rapport, right?
I think that's a great place to start because when working with first responders, what people like, I've mentioned it here before. First of all, cultural competency to work with first responders is essential. If you don't have that experience, don't do it. Not too long ago, I went to sit at a firehouse for a couple hours just to chit chat with the people to kind of introduce me as a guy. Hey, if you need help, here I am. And as soon as they started talking about mental health, they shut down. But as soon as we were talking about other stuff but that, and tones and going off and who's coming in and who's doing what and who's working on a paramedics and whatever's on TV, then suddenly I was one of the boys. There's definitely a different culture, and it's not, I think, that they don't like mental health. I think it's the unknown sometimes that happens. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but I think that sometimes people think that what we do is like some sort of voodoo or whatever. And I'm like, no, I don't read minds just yet. I'm working on it, but I can't read minds. And I don't know if that happens with you, but I certainly know a lot of people have come in like, are you analyzing me? Yeah, there's shit to do, man. I don't have time for this.
Well, I mean, I think also sometimes being a female too, or I mean, you can't see right now, but I'm like 5'2", right? I'm this, I don't look like I've been always doing this for so long, and I think first of all, right, take away the first responder piece. I think anyone, especially say if I need to go get therapy, right? Like walking through the door, that is so awkward, right? Because you don't know, is this person, right? Like the God complex, right? Are they analyzing me? Is everything going to be in documentation, right? Like where is this information going? Can I trust this person, right? And are they able to help me? I think those are big things. And when you're working with a first responder, military veteran population, there's already this armor, right, that has to go up. And that might come from the job, right? And that we become so desensitized to it that it becomes it's our defense mechanism, right? And that's why it can bleed into our personal life. Or right, sometimes people are like, oh, nothing's wrong with you as a first responder. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of shit, but I don't know what to do with all of it, right? So I actually had a phone call with a new person for intake the other day, and once I started to tell them about myself, because they didn't really have a significant background, I could kind of hear that sigh and release, like, oh, okay, you get it. Because they told me that they had seen another clinician in the past and they were telling them about calls, and the clinician just kind of froze and got really uncomfortable. And the person, then the client, right, this first responder felt really uncomfortable and they walked away and they said, I don't know if I can go see someone else because the person I tried to see, right, they couldn't help me. And I felt like very like an out, like what I was doing, right, these calls and like all these things, like it was something bad, right, or it was so like I don't want to touch that. And it was really uncomfortable for them. So to create a space where you can come in and you can have humor, right, and you don't have to explain the terminology to me, right? I can understand that piece, right? And I can jump in and we can start to work on some of the different things, right? Whether it's relationship stuff, right? Alcohol, trauma, right? All these different things. And everyone's different too. I think that's the other thing, whether it's the public or first responders, they have this perception, right, of what a first responder is in the life. But clinically, even right, every person that comes through that door, even if it's all fire, everyone is still different. So we have to be able to be adaptive to what is that person going through. One person with relationship issues and trauma is different than another person with trauma but alcohol issues, right? All these different things, and one call may not affect someone else. And sometimes it's not the job, sometimes it's all family stuff, sometimes it's not family stuff at all, sometimes it is the call, or sometimes it's just from childhood, right? Everyone's different. So I think knowing how to create that environment and take that weight off their shoulders, because that's what they're doing every day. He and she, that's what they're doing every day on the job and at home.
I think that you bring many, many excellent points. One of my favorite ones that you talked about is that it's not always about, trauma. It could be the family, it could be different things in regards to their past. I mean, how often have you seen I don't know, I do the ACEs with all my first responder folks. And how many times is it 7, 8, 9 out of 10? That's like kind of like, yes, yes, yes. I know I've experienced that. But one of the things you talked about that I'm really interested in, it's been a while since I talked about it in the podcast, but to me, substance use is one of the ways I started in the first responder world. I've done it many ways, but when I worked at Parole, I was the substance abuse coordinator, not for the staff, although that worked out a little bit that way, but with the clients. And I think that the substance use issue and other behavioral addictions are prevalent in the first responder world, but it's not always talked about. I know that you've worked with the substance abuse people. You've worked also with the couple stuff. I'd like to go back to the couple stuff a little later on. But with the substance use stuff, what's your experience about the openness about these issues, particularly right now? And we're in a state in Massachusetts where you can smoke weed, but as a cop, if you have THC in your system, that could or a firefighter, you can lose your job essentially. What's your experience so far, like with the substance use world, particularly with the first responders?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point that you make about the Massachusetts, right? And oh, that's another thing too. First responders walking through the door, and if they actually share that information, right? Because no matter what, is it going to get back to the job, right? Is it going to the documentation, all that? But I mean, that's the other thing is you see a spectrum, right? Some people now, I mean, whether they're first responders or not, people are using THC, right? Even like gummies to help like with sleep, right? Anxiety, and because sometimes and SSRIs, right? All that, they don't want to touch it or they have a bad experience. But I think it's on paper, like with the law and everything, I think that's great. But again, first responders have to be very careful. I think it's hard to mix in with first responders too, depending on what they're going through too, because you take someone that is not first responder, right? And maybe they can sit at home and be able to, take THC and drink, but put it with someone that has a first responder background and everything else going on, right? With like the sleep issues and the work stress, and their body might not react the same way. And then also why do we use that, right? We're using it sometimes to cope, right? It's not even just something for sleep and anxiety. And then it becomes, oh, this is really nice, right? I don't know how to use anything else. And then sometimes it can leak into the job, it can leak in the personal life. So I know there is a lot of studies though on different types of substances, right, that we're using for trauma and treatment. So it's a hard line, but I think what I see a lot of is people coming in where it's past that point, right? Usually it's alcohol and sometimes, other definitely other substances, right? Because at first you're not using these substances as you don't expect to walk through the door using these substances and being like, I can't handle it, right? I need to be an inpatient, right? Or it's breaking my family, or it took me away from my job, right? And often sometimes that's why first responders, right, and DUIs, right? It can be very more common than we know.
Right. Well, there's a lot of it not mentioned, right?
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
number two, I think that, there's psychopsilocybin that's being used, MDMA, to treat some of the trauma stuff. I think that,
Um,
go ahead.
oh no, no, go ahead. I was listening. Sorry.
No, no, no worries. Um,
Um,
yes.
we keep hitting. No, it's really interesting that you say that because this is becoming a whole new wave of some of the treatments, right, with different substances, but we still have that issue of addiction and first responders. And I actually, this is another added layer, and this is something we can talk about another day or podcast, but even gambling, we're seeing that. I said it right. All these things, it's even like, depending on if we're looking at it from the job perspective, right? But it's the adrenaline rush, right? And sometimes we can use these things to quiet our minds. So I'm, I tend to look at it more sometimes as people coming in, right, and trying to work on the substance use disorder, right? Things like that versus us being able to start somewhere else at looking at the substances as a treatment.
Right. Well, I think that with the alcohol, I've had a few experiences with people like, almost 2 years in going, by the way, I have an alcohol problem. And some of them have said, why didn't you ask me? I said, because I don't ask 400 questions. I'm not paid for that shit. You're supposed to be coming here for help and be open about it. That's one of the things that I think we need to talk about a little bit. But more importantly, it's like to me, like you use it as a coping mechanism and now you're ashamed. Maybe you did it recreationally at first, or you had a good time
Hmm.
or whatever. I know a little bit about that personally because I cannot have more than one drink probably per month, because if I have more than that, it's usually not it's not good news for most people around me, including myself. But having that knowledge and being a therapist, oh, that's lovey-dovey. That's the warm fucking blanket bullshit, right? But when you're a first responder, particularly in the police and fire, talking about people that you can't handle your liquor, that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, that's my experience.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I have not had a drink. February 12th, 2026 will be 6 years. Yeah, and a big
Awesome.
reason of yeah, it's I feel like that was even around like COVID. Yeah, but I just made the decision years ago to stop drinking. I think I could tell early on, right? And as many of us do, right? As we're in our 20s and 30s, this is sometimes not good in terms of a coping mechanism, right? And then like my own health and like just sensitivities to even like alcohol, right? I mean, and making that choice though to not drink and has been huge for me in my health. But I do share this information often when I am working with first responders, even at the intake, because I think it helps them have that connection of when they are going through anything with any kind of substance. So like, oh, okay, I this is another factor where I'm not going to be on edge, right? Or maybe this clinician understands it, right? Or being able to have some of those other tools to help them be able to work on some of these issues, right? Because the biggest thing that we forget is that not only being a first responder with a job, right, of the broken sleep, all the other issues that come with it, but throw in alcohol, right? So that already worsens the sleep and the PTSD symptoms. It increases your irritability. It increases conflict at home, right? And impairs decision making, all these things on top of already the baseline of doing the job. And one of the things that I make very clear though, because sometimes I do have people coming in that will say, I'm struggling with drinking and I want to reach out for therapy. And I sometimes have to clinically say, depending on what, right, when we do the risk assessment of that of what level they're at, they have to go to inpatient first. And then we tear down, right? Because I've had many cases where people will come in and say, okay, I need to work on my drinking. They do a few sessions of therapy and it gets even worse. And I always have to work with that when we're doing with peer support, right? And referrals that sometimes we need to look at this for inpatient first and then outpatient, right? And then looking at the outpatient stuff, whether it's outpatient therapy or groups, because imagine, right, you're going to therapy once a week to work on your substance use, but then you're also still have that first responder job and all the stressors at home. And every little thing that stresses you out on top of that is going to increase the substance use disorder or whatever you're using as a coping mechanism that's negative with that substance, right?
Right.
And you're only with me for what, an hour once a week, and everything else outside session, and so that's why you're just piling it on, and it really takes away from the work. And I'm seeing it so much more. And again, how much of this is, I see it in stages of, right, when we're first on the job, 5 years on, and then 10 years on, right? We have to repivot actually every 5 years, and the way that I look at it, because someone on the job, for example, fire, right, a firefighter, when they get on 5 years, right, this is awesome. Like, I'm doing the training, I'm young, getting into the culture. But then when you're 50, right, 45, 50, it's different, right? You're exhausted. Like, you're going through the thick of it potentially at home. And maybe you're not a lieutenant, right? Or a captain. You're a firefighter because you're happy, but your body slows down, right? And then metabolism, and then you get desensitized. I mean, that's 20 years. So what are we going to use? Sometimes alcohol, and we hide it, right? Because if anyone finds out that you can't handle it, then you have that stigma, and you've been on the job for so long, and you tell yourself that you are fine, right? And you keep going because that's what we tell ourselves in this job sometimes. And alcohol is that warm friend sometimes, but it it's hard. I think being able to acknowledge when alcohol is a negative coping skill versus what am I looking for here? It's hard to acknowledge when we're using it as a negative coping skill versus I can just put it, and not acknowledge it.
Well,
Because, for example, well, sorry to cut you. I had someone that actually said to me, I was running late because my coworker, dropped and was throwing up blood on a call, and they had to go to the hospital, and they were told, I only have like a day left to live.
yeah.
And you're kind of right, that's where I go from like 0 to 60. That's what I mean.
Well, and I think that what I was going to say is what happens a lot with different departments, fire, police, parole, probation, everyone. Well, Alexa can handle her liquor, so obviously I can too. And I got to be able to do it because Alexa's doing it or whatever. And then there's always this comparison game that's never going to fucking win anything. I get really annoyed with people with the comparison game because they always do this. Well, they can do this, so I can, or they went to the same call twice that really pissed them off or hurt them, or now they're having PTSD. So I got to learn how to handle it. And they didn't have PTSD, and I do. The comparison game always kills you. And for me, the other part that you really mentioned, which is so important, is when I ask questions about substance use, I gauge the room, but most of those guys genuinely want to know about your past. And I've been very open about my stories about having, excessive drinking in my teens and then for a long time in my early adulthood. And that really makes them, oh, you can understand that stuff. And that really helps. So I think telling them is very important. I don't think we need to, I don't think we should skip one important thing. You talked about gambling and behavioral addiction. I think that what I was going to say is that when you got the behavioral stuff, you got the sex stuff
That's huge. Yes.
and the gambling. I had a guy tell me that he starts gambling with the soccer games in England at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays or Sundays, and they finish with ping pong in North Korea or South Korea or whatever. And I'm like, you got an issue. Oh no, no, it's just for fun. I'm like, well, if that you're not doing the stuff you're supposed to do every day, or you're like ignoring your family because you need to know who won the ping pong game in Korea at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's a lot of issues there. I
Yeah, there's this awesome podcast. I have to send it to you. I was listening to it. There was this guy out in California, and he was a financial broker, whatever. He actually had accounts for celebrities, including Alanis Morissette. And he had gambling in his family addiction. And one day, I think he got into, it was actually, it's funny. It was like his son's or daughter's soccer coach came up and was like, "Hey, do you want to make a bet?" And this guy ended up making like $50,000 bets each day, and he stole $4 million from Alanis Morissette and other people. And he ended up getting into cocaine and like cheating and all these things. And he went to federal prison.
Wow.
And he talks about it. And what happened is he actually got sober, and now he is a LADAC, and he helps other people. And he talks about his journey. I have to send that to you. But he talks about how you get hooked with the gambling, right? And how it's a gateway for all these other things, right? And just hiding it, and how it broke his whole, personal life. And because he was so afraid, he did not want anyone to know. He just kept stacking, right? And the feelings of guilt and shame, right? That was more than actual what was going on in real time with the gambling. And he talks about, he's like, I don't have any money, but I've never been happier. And I'm sober, and he's a LADAC and working on this. And it's fascinating. It's really interesting talking and hearing about people who go through these things right on the other end of it, and they can tell their story. And one of the reasons, I think alcoholism definitely runs in my family genetically. That's another thing too, genetically, we forget about. And you brought up a really good point about the comparison game. And it's so hard, right? Because I'm picturing someone right now, right? That first responder that's kind of like sweating, right? When we are hiding the alcohol, because at the end of the day, right, we just want to be like everyone else. And alcohol it's a social thing, right? It's a nice release. It's being part of like the boys girls club, right? It's part of that.
Right.
I mean, right, we go back like 30 years. What did first responders do? How did they connect, right? It's in the back room drinking.
Many
But
bars and many fire departments that I know of, anyway.
oh yeah, I mean, I think old school, this was way back in like firefighters first start, like you could have a beer on the job,
Right.
right? But yeah, but you never want to be that person that has something wrong with them compared to the person next to you. And sometimes I hate have people come in and they're like, I'm so mad because I can't figure out why I have this issue with alcohol because I don't have this level of PTSD, right? That my coworker has or that people say, right? They're like, everything's good at home, but it's still something along the way. And I think that's really hard when people still have to come to the awareness of what their relationship with alcohol or any kind of addiction is.
Well, I talk about addiction really easily for me. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but I tell people like, the first few ones are pretty much a choice, whether alcohol, whatever drug you're thinking about. After you hit 4 or 5, no longer a choice, it's a maintenance program. And
Yeah.
because if you don't drink as much, then you're going to start shaking, or you're going to have sweats, or you're going to have it, you're not going to be able to handle it. It'll get rid of your headache if you drink right away. That's the hair of the dog, right?
Hmm.
And with your opioids in particular, that's really one of the things. And benzos lose their effectiveness within 14 to 28 days if you take them regularly. And so you start doing it more, but like you're shameful. You know that this is wrong, and you don't want to talk about it. And how come Alexa has been able to stop drinking and I'm still having a drink once a month? Oh my God, I should never tell Alexa anything. Well, no, we're different. We're different people. We have different motivations. But we got to be able to be open about that shit. But I think that happens so many times. And the gambling is the same thing. You talked about stacking. That's one of the biggest problems. I was once with a friend of mine. This is years ago while I was drinking heavily. He won $10,000 at the casino, and I was so happy.
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, that won't touch the 55,000 I'm in debt for gambling. And I remember going, okay, I'm not coming to the casino anymore. And I go once in a while. Now I'm not going to lie, but I bring $100 and then my $100 gone, it's gone. I just don't deal with it. But yeah, I think that's what it is we chase, and we become less of a choice as we go along. And I think that's where people get the shame, but I think that's the stigma we got to break, because your 14 drink on your 26th month of every day, it's no longer a choice. You just need it so that you feel okay and that your liver doesn't fucking explode.
Yep. And you bring up the good point, right? You forget about the physical dependence and what your body's doing and how it's breaking down, right? It's not just the emotional stuff. And again, it's looking at even like what age are we doing these things, right? When you're 20 versus like 45 on the job, it's different, right? Or even starting out at 20 years old, or even feeling like you need to compete with other people, right? And that's why I think this is like another whole conversation. This kind of goes into first responders and the personal life at home and relationships, but making sure that you have your self-care and your limit of what are my boundaries at work versus like what I bring home, right? And how I deal with all this stuff. Because sometimes, right, we can wrap it up all into one ball and then it just explodes.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.